Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie, and we are back for the 2025 AFL season. I'm absolutely buzzing. It's the start of Feb. Things are starting to heat up as the AFL season approaches. We've got a big episode in store as we preview this season. We'll be going through all the latest injury news, contract news, season expectations. We've got a new president, which is wild. We'll be chatting about all the upcoming preseason games as well. But first, before we get stuck into all of that, Lockie, mate, how are you? How are you going? And are you excited to be back to talk all things Carlton for the 6th year of the pod?
6 years is insane to think about. Yeah, you've picked a great time for us to get back into it, mate. I'm over the off season now, ready to get back into it, ready to, get way too deep into it for the first couple of weeks of February.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sort of the last time we spoke, I think it might have been very at the start of January to cover the draft, quite late at the time. But the excitement levels then were pretty small. It was sort of starting to think, okay, it's been a bit of a break now. Give me the football. But now recording at the start of Feb, all I'm thinking about is, can we bounce the ball right now? I'm ready to go. Round one against the Tigers. Just bring it on. But let's start this podcast for the year, season expectations. And it's probably the biggest question we launch into every year in the season preview. So, Lockie, I want to know, what are your expectations for Carlton in 2025?
Oh, boy. I mean, it's really something that's evolving week by week at the moment. Like, there's a lot more kind of footy chat happening in my circles and that kind of thing. So I guess in terms of expectations, I'm not expecting us to be a grand final premiership team. I'm not expecting, but I'm very willing to have a debate with anybody that thinks there's a clear team better than us at this stage.
Ooh. Interesting. That feels like a fence sit to kick things off weirdly, but I'll let you expand.
Well, it's all about what that expectations means, right? Like, looking back at where we've been in the Vossi era so far, 12 wins, 13.5 wins, 13 wins. It's all very, it's all been quite samey, even though the positions at the end of the season have been quite different. So I'm expecting that we can win more games, but I don't think you can ever expect to win the flag, right? Like, it is it's just kind of a whole different bar. But like I said, when I look at the teams that are around us, I'm like, make me a really strong case why we're not the best, essentially.
No, I really like it. It's tough when you look at the word expectations for the year, and I know so many will say straight out, it's premiership, and I know you try to look at it a little bit differently, and I'm excited over the next couple of questions I've got on my run sheet to dive through it all. I will be one of those people that will say the expectation is a premiership. I think it has to be. I mean, we've got a list that can contend. Our top 6, when you're looking at our roster, it's as good as anyone in the comp, if not better than most. We've now got some experience as well with the list in playing finals to some degree. We know what it takes throughout a season, not going too hard too early, trying to get that timing right, which I think is something that is a lot harder to learn. You almost have to be there to know what it takes. And while I say that, the expectation is a premiership, if you do just take away that expectation, I think that top 4 is absolutely what the expectation should be. At a minimum, ideally, it's that top 2, so you get that extra home final. For me, that expectation, it's top 4 at a minimum, but top 2 premiership is what we should be expecting. But I think we probably land similarly is, if we don't hit that, it's not end of the world. There is still a pass mark that's maybe lower than just winning the flag, because it is so difficult.
It's weird because I think the 2024 season has changed some of those expectations around. Like, with how 2023 went, it felt like all we could do was go up from there. So to then falter a bit in 24, it's kind of made it a bit hazier, I feel. But yeah, no, I'm completely with you. I think anything that isn't top 4 would be disappointing in 2025. It's just that getting to the premiership, we've just seen how Like
Hmm.
how challenging, obviously, that is. And any team, like Brisbane didn't even finish in the top 4. And yet they clearly seemed like the best team at the end of the season. So if we can get into the top 4, that's the minimum. The home final, to me, that's that's what we're expecting.
Yeah, everything has to be perfect at the right time. It's so difficult. And that kind of works well into my next question, which is, so how are you balancing the perspective of, we're in this premiership window for, the next 3 or 5 years. That's what everyone around Carlton is feeling. How do you balance that perspective from the expectation of we must win now? We had a down season last year. We have to win now. Why look at 3-5 years in the future when you don't know what can happen? We need to win this season. How are you balancing that thought?
It's an interesting question. I feel like I am keen to discuss that concept of the window, I guess. Like, what for you would even, like, what are we sacrificing to have that win now mindset? Like, I think about some other sports potentially where, if there's less players on the field, like sports like basketball, for example, where this window is more defined to me. Like that's the question I have, I guess. What would we be sacrificing if we say, no, we're going all in versus a bit more of a balanced approach? Like, what does that even look like to you?
Yeah, I guess where I'm to quantify it, what I think when I'm looking at the premiership window is the list demographic that we've got at the moment. When you look at our top 6 players, Wiedering, Cripps, Charlie, Harry, that kind of spine there, and the age that those guys are in, it's probably, this next 3 to 5 years is they'll be out by that time, sort of is their peak to win in that time and maximizing the current top end of our list right now. And I get what you're trying to say with putting everything into the list to win this second. I guess where I'm looking at it is not necessarily build the list to win this season and sacrifice everything else. It's more in you don't know what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. Cripper could have a debilitating injury. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. And all of a sudden you don't have him for the next 3 to 5 years. Culture issue comes up and half the players request trades and disappear. Melbourne thought they were in a premiership window. They happened to be there and win one. And all of a sudden, look at it now. We're not looking at them at even a top 4 team. Whereas you could have potentially argued at that time, they had the next 5 years to absolutely go for it. That's probably where I'm seeing this balancing the window approach in. We probably think that the next 3 to 5 years are our time to contend. And in one of those years, hopefully if we're around it, we'll bob up and win at least one. But you just never know what could happen. So how do you balance the expectation of it's okay to not win right now versus, well, we need to win now because we just don't know what could transpire?
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot more sense to me. I would say I feel more optimistic about 5 years' time now than I did a year ago. And it's hard for me to disconnect if this is Carlton nuffiness. But when I look at guys like Elijah, Ollie, Cowan, I think from where they are now compared to maybe 12 months ago, I think, okay, there's potential A-graders here. Chuck Jagger into that mix as well, where I'm like, okay, I can see a scenario where in 5 years, these are the leaders that are keeping us as a contending side. But the other side of that is really clear. Like a non-Carlton person would look at those names and look at our list and go, your 10 best players are in their prime now.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that like this is the best chance that we have to win. I guess the main point I'm making is a year ago, I probably would have been even more like, if we don't get that success in the next few years, we're screwed. Whereas I feel like we're building a bit better balance now.
Yeah, I agree with that in the sense of how we seem to be a lot more well run as a football club, top to bottom. List management seems to be not just for the now, but also for the future. The club just feels well balanced And
Yep.
hopefully that can give us long-term success, like clubs like, Geelong, Sydney, that always seem to be up there because they're just so well run from the top. And while I do
Yep.
agree with that, I guess when I'm looking at it in isolation with the list we've currently got, we've got potentially the best midfielder the club's ever had, two of the best key forwards we've at least had in a very, very long time, one of the best key defenders. We've all got them at the same time. Plus,
Yep.
guys like Walsh, and I could start naming a bunch of others as well that are all clearly at that top end of talent. We've got them all at the right time. We don't want to waste that. And so there is a bit of a worry when I look at things and start projecting and think, we really need to win with this list, because can you win with a list that's worse than this? I don't know. Time will tell. And I think when I'm looking at things right now, after 2 years of finals, we probably should have been playing finals a few seasons before that as well.
Yep.
The time to strike is now. And I think, we can definitely go in right now and win it. Can we go another season like we did and sort of just limp into finals? I don't know. I feel like we need to be having these seasons where it's top four, going deep, run into finals, and then just being around it for the next 3 or 5 years. And in one of those, you should jump up and take a premiership. But I think the way that I'm balancing both of those perspectives right now is just you don't know when you're going to win a flag. It is so difficult. It's the most even the competition's ever been. Like you said earlier, Brisbane halfway through the season did not look like they were going to make finals, let alone win the flag. You never know what happens. Anyone can win on their day. We were top two, thought we were flying, limped into finals, absolutely got belted by Brisbane. You just need to be there. Top four is the aim. Get into a prelim. Do that every single year. One of them, you'll get the win. So I think that's maybe how I'm balancing it right now.
Totally. No, that resonates 100%. I mean, that was one of the things that the new Prez said in his little mini introductory interview about, like, the goal is to contend every year. And I don't know. I don't want to be, I definitely don't want to be in a place where in 5 years we are not loving watching Carlton again like we were 5 years ago. Like, I don't know whether my attitude is like changing on that, but like obviously winning the premiership is the absolute number one thing that we've got to be striving for. But I also would love us to be contending every year. Just having that hope is what makes the whole season great. I just cannot believe that we, like, looking back on last season, that we were second with 5 rounds to go. It's like we had as good a chance as, right? Like, so we were a contender kind of all the way through to there. How can we just make that happen a little longer?
And that's something that I think does weirdly excite me about this season. You could easily look at it the other way and see it as such a negative, but when talking about knowing when to strike at the right time, you look at so many of our seasons we've had performed in the first half, fell away, didn't make finals, didn't perform in the first half, came out of nowhere, almost made a grand final. And then last season, it was 3/4 of the season, almost 2/3 of the year. Amazing. Fell off. Surely by now, and I know so much is out of our control, injuries, fitness, it's so difficult. Luck has to be there as well, riding with you. But we've now got so much experience in knowing how to shape out your season, fitness-wise, what you're doing in preseason, what that means for you come round 20, round 21, and peaking at that right time. It feels like these next few years, we are so primed with the experience of knowing what we need to do to be there at the pointy end of September. And that's just why I'm so optimistic about what could happen this year.
Totally agree. I couldn't disagree with any of that.
Yeah, so to immediately turn to a negative, given that this year will be, that sort of 30 years since we last won a flag, 1995, how much of that narrative do you think will impact the need for that immediate success, and should it impact at all?
Oh, it's such a hard question. I mean, it's definitely going to be something that's in the ether of the fans. I think that's for sure. I guess like I said, I don't think in terms of that narrative around the window and the win now, I think, you said it really well. Like that's a conversation to have in the off season when the list management things happen and the trade period and drafting and all that. But for right now, like I think we're going to do everything that we can from now until the end of September to get this one done. So it would be very symbolic and perfect for it to happen 30 years after. It definitely feels right.
No, I love it because I think there's going to be clearly noise. It's such an easy narrative. Any journalist is going to eat that up if there's a blip in the season. Things aren't performing well. Oh, it's been another 30 years. You can just see it going to happen. But I don't think it really should affect us. I mean, if we are this strong club, then it's just outside noise, really. I reckon use it as a positive, not a negative. Use it to motivate you and say, okay, 30 years, beautiful. Let's get it done. Let's win it this year. Let's make sure it's not 31. And what better time to do it than on sort of like a 10-year anniversary of winning a flag. We love that sort of symmetry in numbers. So it's just one of those perfect times to strike. Now, we've kind of gone around this a little bit in what the expectations are. And I'm really keen to know all the listeners and the viewers' thoughts on their expectations for the season. And then particularly this question, because I think it puts a nice little bow on top of all of it for looking ahead at what this season could produce is what does, in an overall sense, success look like to you in 2025? What's that kind of pass mark that when you look back at the season, once it's all over, you can say, okay, I'm okay with that. There was at least some level of success in the season because we've spoken about how hard it is to win a flag. And so I kind of want to take the winning premiership out of the season being successful because, only 9 teams have won a flag in the last 20 years. That just shows you how hard it is to do. So many teams will miss out over the next 20 years. So what does taking away that flag, winning a premiership, what does success look like for you for Carlton in 2025?
Well, maybe this feels counterintuitive considering we don't like to think about the outside noise and the narratives in the media and those kind of things. But I guess to me, I think if we are seen as a serious contender throughout the whole season, then that would be a successful year because the way that the 2024 ended, we were a joke basically with that loss and people reflect on that season and go, well, Carlton weren't even really a serious contender considering the teams that finished above them. So I think regardless of how, the way that the season actually ends in 2025, if we look back and we can say, okay, the entire year we were a serious contender and we were just a considerably different team, that would be a success. Because like I touched on earlier, when you look at just a win-loss perspective, the 3 years of the Voss era have been extremely similar. And we should be better than a 13-win team.
It's such an interesting narrative, isn't it? There's a lot of, same old Carlton, a lot of fan bases not taking us seriously. And, to a degree, what have we achieved to change their minds? But there is a part of them that they're going to think that and try to keep us a joke because they're so scared of us being good. They need that to be reality because they can't live in a world where we're good. And fair enough, if it's a team that I disliked, I wouldn't want them to be good either. And I'd be still making those jokes. And I like that take on this, what's success, changing that narrative, being a team that's feared, being one that is more respected. We've gone in, we've had a good crack at finals, and you can go into 2026, whether we've won one or not, and gone, don't want to come up against Carlton. Because there is still this, we know that Carlton can bottle it. You look at the end of the season, I know we didn't have a lot of cattle out there in that last game against St. Kilda, but that's still not an excuse to have that victory there and lose it. It feels like it's something we've had happen to us quite often over recent years. Until we change it, until we have that success, it's going to be there. I think when I'm looking at what's a successful season, I said that the expectations are we win a premiership, we finish top 2. And I think when you can kind of take a little bit of that away for me to be happy at the season when we do the end of year review and I can sit back and be proud of what we at least accomplished. If a premiership isn't it, then I think it's top four, it's prelim, it's that deep finals run, probably like you're saying, where we look like a real contender. And then we can take that onto the next season and give ourselves a red hot crack. I don't want to be another year where I'm having to come up with the reasons why instead of having the evidence of why. I think that's where I'm looking at it.
Is there a win mark for you? Because God, when that it kind of shocked me thinking about how obviously the 12-win season was not even making finals, and then the 13-win season the next year was a prelim. Is that something you've thought about?
That's probably why I haven't thought about it a lot, if I'm honest, because there is such a fluctuation, because the competition seems to keep getting more even and it's so much harder. Do you need more wins? I probably just haven't looked at that in depth. I tend to look at it a bit more of, I want to make another prelim at the minimum. That's what I want. Whatever wins gets me there, I don't care. I'm happy to limp into, top four, but get top four on whatever wins that means. Have you kind of put that benchmark of how many wins you want for the season? Because that'll be great to then look back and have that in the content for the off season.
No, I'm still figuring out where I land on it. The main reason I think about that is just because the ladder position is not fully within our control. Like it's a reflection of the entire league in that season. Whereas wins feels a little bit more tangible. Like that's something that we can actually move the needle on. And I agree that making a prelim is also that, because you can finish fifth and make a prelim, for example. So that's what makes it kind of weird. Because would you say that if we finish seventh and make the prelim, that's a successful season, right?
Oh, look, it still is. And I think where I'll come back to that, so feel free to make me have to answer that better. But I wanted to kind of challenge you a little bit on what you said as far as maybe the wins and losses not mattering as much if you've won more games, but the league was better, so therefore you didn't make top four. I think it's more the league is a reflection on us and how we perform. And if we've got more wins than ever, but we haven't made top four, then the reflection is we're not a top four team. And so I think regardless of how many wins and losses, how good we are will be a reflection of where we finish, because you've won more games. It's dumb to dumb it down.
Yeah, I get you.
If we won more games than most of the competition, except for 2 or 3 teams, then I think that's the reflection of what I want. I want to be one of the best 4 teams in the competition, hence probably that prelim. But I think it's like that Brisbane factor. You can find a way to, outside of the top 4, win a flag. It's possible, but it's, I guess we haven't hit that top 4 mark yet in this era. So it's probably just something I want ticked off the bucket list. And it makes more sense rather than having to do it the hard way, which we have tried the last few seasons. If we can make it easier for us, give ourselves that double chance, rest up a little bit more heading into the finals. Those are the things that maybe can give us that little bit of that extra step in 25.
No, that resonates. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we seem to ask this next question every year, but for us to take the next step and ultimately be successful, Lockie, from last season, what needs to change? How are we taking that next step?
Wow. What an easy question. What an easy question. Where do we go with this? I guess we're going to talk about actual footy, right? Game plan?
You'd hope so. You'd hope so. We're about 20 minutes into the podcast, so we probably should start to talk some footy.
Let me triage these few bullet points in my head. I guess for me, the number one thing would be, how do we get more out of our inside 50s? That, if I had to put one on top of the list, it would probably be that, because it just feels like the biggest thing that could move the needle for us. We know that we are a little bit two-dimensional at times with the way that we go inside 50. Sometimes it seems like there isn't a whole lot of method to how we do it. And it results in us not putting the points on the board that you would expect us to. So whether that's about being less predictable, whether that's about personnel, we could, I'm sure we'll talk about Kemp at some stage, things like that, better output from the small forwards. I think if we can sit back at the end of 2025 and say that, wow, we really found a way to get more out of our inside 50s, then we'll have gone a long way to being better.
No, I do really like that. I had written down here as well, very similar minds in just how do we, I took it a bit of a different way, probably a dumber way, was just how do we get more goals outside of Charlie and Harry? And how do we get it? And also just how do we get a bit more of a stable forward line? Because it does seem like that's the only line we haven't nailed down our best 6 or 7. I think your midfield, you can pretty much say, at least here's 5 or 6 guys that should play if healthy. Same for the back line. Forward line, everything's up in the air. There's a lot of players you can rotate through there. You can see that as a positive, but I would just like for once us to know who our best players are because they're performing. At the moment, we don't know because there's so many question marks on players. What's Motlop like? Can Williams do it for full season? Fogarty's been great, but is there someone else that can do what he does pressure-wise and kick goals? Is Moya going to be a guy that steps up? There's so many question marks on that. But as far as looking at the inside 50s, I think that's a really clever way to address it because clearly we're getting a lot of the football in, but we're not making it enough. How many times do we bomb the ball in and the opposition mop it up, move it straight down their end and score? We need to clearly tidy that up. So, yeah, I'm very excited about finding out how we do that. Do you think that stability in that front half and the chemistry we can get from a more stable forward line is something that can help?
I hope so. Yeah, I do hope so. It's funny reflecting on last year and when you look at the goal scorers, like you said, and to his credit, always did put 33 of them through. So when you take him out of there and you want to be less reliant on Curnow and Mackay, then my God, there needs to be multiple people to stand up and be those threats. So I really hope that the guys that you touched on can be on the park the majority of the season. Particularly guys like Williams is someone I'm pretty bullish on to be able to use that goal sense that he has and put a lot through. Like I mentioned, I'm intrigued about the Kemp factor and whether I'm sure we'll talk about it in kind of the predictions show more, but whether he can play a role that just creates better synergy.
No, I think, mate, there's 100% issues. I was just trying to find some of the stats for the end of last season, and we ranked 12th for marks inside 50 in the whole competition. You look at our forward line, you look at having Harry and Charlie there. The fact that we're not top 3 for marks inside 50 feels insane to me. I don't quite understand why we are so low in that, and tidying that up clearly, the efficiency, the way we move the ball, being more direct, that's going to change things. And what role does Kemp have to play in that? I know we've seen the 3-headed monster with McGovern down there. It didn't work amazingly. That was Teague in charge. So I'm interested to know how Michael Voss can make it work. Also think that Kemp's probably a bit more of a dynamic player and maybe that will help us a little bit more. But there's so many question marks around this forward line. I'm just so intrigued to see how we attempt to answer them and then what true answers we get from that. I think one of my main points, Lockie, is simply just a healthy list will make us so much better a team in 2025. You look back and think about how many players we had training in the back end of the year, how many were on the pine. How can you possibly, as a coach, try to tinker with the game plan, try different things when you've got about 10 blokes that are actually training and you can't get a full match sim going? So I think that's massive. Getting your players healthy on the park at the right time. Fingers crossed Lady Luck can work her magic there.
Yeah, it kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? But it really just underpins absolutely everything for this year and was a big part of why it all collapsed in 2024. The other kind of main one that I wrote down for this, it's kind of a bit more of an Ian point, I would say. So maybe you can speak to it more. But I think another thing that will take us to the next level is getting better at adjusting when things aren't going right, particularly in game. And it's hard to put something tangible on that. But it really felt like there was a number of times, or just in the Voss era in general, where things aren't going well in a game. And then the game finishes with, well, how did we combat that? And there isn't anything that you can put your finger on. So I'd love to see more of that this year.
No, that's a really interesting point. I didn't have that note written down, but I probably should have, because there are times when, and it's kind of how AFL is at the moment, teams get these runs on and they can be incredibly difficult to stop. Seems like when it happens to us, they always happen and occur at the worst time possible, and we just aren't able to get the game back on our terms. It's been a big question mark on Voss and the assistant coaches, probably just their coaching ability as one, and how many times do we out-tactician the opposition? How many times do we make our strengths and actually win a game and take away the positives from an opposition? All of those things happen in game. How can we shift? How can we adjust? I'm very excited to see what we do. And if we get any little inklings in the preseason games of different ways we've adjusted things, I've been really listening to all the content that Carlton's been putting out on the summer sessions and hearing some of the players talk. And can't remember exactly who said it. It might have been Doherty on one of the latest episodes, but spoke a little bit about, making those little tweaks. And now that they've had time with the game plan, that little bit of stability, that's helping them take that next step forward. And probably where I wanted to pivot this next question, because every single team in the competition is trying to improve. They're brought in players from other clubs. They're working hard in the off season to take that next step. We've somewhat answered it there, but do you have any ideas or talking points on how we can take that next step compared to other teams that have maybe brought in more in the off season? Teams like Freo have been spoken about a lot, bringing in a guy like Bolton. We've brought in Jagger Smith, but he's an 18-year-old. So how can we use our advantages to be better when everyone at this time of year is kind of doing the same thing?
Yeah, it's that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I guess everybody knows what the strengths of our list are and who Carlton are around, obviously our strength, like the pressure and contest aspects. So, I mean, it kind of goes to the adjusting point and the tactical point, which is I hope that we can have more variety this season without going away from that, because it's the one wood, as we've spoken plenty about. So I guess, we know in terms of personnel, we know what the competitive advantages are for this team. Like Harry and Charlie are the best key forward pairing in the league. Like you said, we have one of our best midfielders ever in this team. Can TDK become one of the best ruckmen in the league this year? I think so. So you don't want to kind of go away from those things, but it's just all about having more variety, I suppose, so that when a team comes out, they can't go, stop Harry and Charlie from getting the ball, nullify Cripps in the middle, and we'll win. Like, how can we make that narrative not the case while also while also still using them well?
Yeah.
How's that for big old fence in my room right now?
No, see, I don't think that's fence sitting, because I think one of the big criticisms of us last season, particularly around the midfield, is it a bit one-dimensional at times? Do Carlton have that kind of plan B that gets thrown around? What is okay, things aren't going against us, put this guy into the middle, make this slight adjustment, and all of a sudden we'll improve. It sort of seemed like when we weren't going well, we're just going to stay at not going well. There is no fixing those problems. Is that a Jagger Smith? Is that Elijah Hollands running more through the midfield? Is it simply getting our best players on the field at the same time consistently? I'm not sure. I wrote down, maybe is it just stability? And it was less of I'm sure this is the answer, more putting it out as a question, because other teams are bringing in a host of new players that may take time to gel. what our
Sure.
next step forward could just be the stability with this. Does it just simply take time to build on the foundations of a game plan? Thinking back to where we were with Bolton and Teague, maybe it's taken a little bit for Michael Voss to build this with this team, and now taking those little steps forward and adjusting the game plan. Think about the assistant coaches. They're now building these relationships with these players. That can take time as well. I remember hearing Jordan Boyd talk about just the games he had played each season, and just trying to take that next step of playing, 6 games, 8 games. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to adjust to the level, get that synergy with your teammates. Unless you've lived in those moments and played them, it's hard to know how you react to it and how to improve on it. So maybe it is just the stability of this list, spending that time together, that will take us forward. As really sad as an answer as that is, or maybe it is this new strength and conditioning team. Maybe that's what it's going to be.
So.
Speed and power, who knows? But I'm interested to know what everyone else that's watching and listening in the comments below or over on the socials at Navy Blue Corner think is the way that we can take the next step in 2025. It'll be very, very interesting to watch.
It's the kind of that comments like that are the kind of thing that I think a non-Carlton fan would look at and be like I feel like the non-Carlton community in the AFL are pretty down on us for 2025 when I look at, other teams talking about where we're going to be. And yeah, maybe it's going to bite me, but I feel like I genuinely think that stability and the fact that we have been getting the runs on the board over these past few years and building up. I don't know. I am genuinely just so bullish this year, and it's hard to, put the tangible things to that. But I think that whole piece that you're talking about right there is spot on.
And look, I love your positivity, but for the second time in a row, as soon as you start to get too happy and up and about, Lockie, I'm bringing you back down. So we've talked about the positives, but if we do have a really poor season, what happens, Lockie?
What's a poor season to you, Ian?
I think a poor season is what happened last year or worse. It's limping into finals. It's not putting in a good performance in a final or even winning one. I think we need to at least win a final. And, God forbid we don't make finals. That's an absolute disaster. That's where I think I'm quantifying it. So if that happens for you, if we have a very similar season to last year or worse, how would you analyze that at the end of the season?
I know you hate when I give nuance to a question like this, but I'm forced to, because I think there's a type of poor season that we could have where coaching changes are needed.
Yeah.
But there's also a poor season where I imagine that's not what we would need, because just as we finished talking about all the stability and points that we had then, it's such a hard fork in the road moment. If we say we finish 9th, which absolutely would be a disaster of a season, there's also a scenario where I'm like, well, I don't think clearing house is the solution, which is what I think a lot of people would be calling for.
I reckon I think there is nuance in it where you can have a really bad year, still make changes, but it not have to be this entire seismic shift of the football club. I think it'd more just be assistant coaching changes. If it was bottom of the ladder, then okay, maybe Vossi, might have to go if it's a complete disaster. But if it is this same as last year, that's probably a couple of players might have to go. Nothing ridiculously big, but more change than maybe the last couple of years. But I'm going to maybe fence it and take this another stupid way, which I know I wrote the run sheet. I put this question on there, but I'm kind of not looking at this right now, Lockie. I just think it's, which I know is stupid for me to do this, but I think it's maybe unhealthy to have to look at it in the way of, maybe we don't know what's going to happen yet. So why potentially already look and say it's going to be a poor season? I am in the mental mode at the moment, and this could change rapidly at any stage, but my mind's not on that. My mind is on improving at this stage. So we'll see what happens. But to maybe go back the other way, we kind of gave them a pass last year. There will definitely not be a pass this season if we do the exact same. That is where I will be putting the foot down when it comes to it.
No, I'm with you. But it's just all about being strategic and not making rash decisions based on like what happens. Like you're right. You cannot sit here and define, you know, if this is the outcome, this is what we have to do, because it's just a ridiculous way to analyze it. There is a world where we do not make finals, and it is not, and Vossi is not the pro. Or how should I word this? There's a world where we don't make the finals, and Vossi is still the man for the job,
and we win the flag the next year.
Sure.
With
there is a world where we don't make finals, and we look at the situation and we go, we no longer have the faith that we did.
Yes.
In this coaching team, we need change. Both of those outcomes are possible in that scenario. So I like where your head's at. That's good.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's different. It's new. We like it. But let's talk about the big stories of the preseason. And unfortunately, we're not starting off with some positivity. It's the injury news that has hit first and foremost. I was almost going to try and get a little video out reacting to this at the time because I had a lot to say when it broke. But we're a few weeks removed now. Unfortunately, Nic Newman has ruptured his patella tendon. He's out for the season. I'll start with the big one, Lockie. How big of a loss is Nic Newman for our chances in 2025?
Runner-up in the John Nichols medal in 2024. Obviously, that's a big thing to be taking out of your team. God, when you just have a think about it, he's had such an awesome time at Carlton. Like, I feel like I didn't have major expectations when he came across. So he's certainly over-delivered, and such an important part of the team. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's a massive loss. I had written down here, massive loss. I guess we just have to deal with it, which again is maybe that weirdly positive part of it, but it's just, what do you do when one of your better players goes down? You're losing so much. You're losing that leadership. He can be that one-on-one small defender. He's got that attacking ability. He's one of the best kicks, by foot in the team.
Yeah.
There's so much that you're losing.
By foot, you reckon?
Yeah, that's normally what you try to do with it, Lockie. But it is just, it's one of those things you don't want to see. And it's frustrating to lose anyone for the year. And maybe this is a bad thing to say, but it feels like we never get those season-ending injuries to like the worst player on your list. And I'm not going to start naming names because it feels rough to say, but you get an end-of-season injury to someone that maybe you drafted, in the rookie draft, and you go, okay, well, I probably didn't expect him to play any footy this year. I can cop that being our only end-of-season injury, but it feels like we always get someone who is integral to how we want to play going into the year. I'm thinking about, Zach Williams. It was, okay, we want to change the way we move the football from halfback. Bang, down he goes. Now it feels like the same talk was happening with Nic Newman. He goes down for the year. So it is very sad, but we have to move on. So how are you looking at replacing him? Is there a player?
Yeah.
Where did you see things going into the season? And what does your kind of back 6 or 7 look like this year?
It's a very interesting part of the ground for us. Plenty of names that you can throw in the mix there. Obviously, we know that Ollie was training down there before this news. Sam Doherty is a name where his role seemed a little bit up in the air, and maybe there's a chance that this could mean that he goes back there. It's a hard one to replace. Another thing to put out there for me is I wonder what Saad's role looks like this year. We've kind of been calling for the last couple of years, like, where's we want that old Saadi dash. Like, why don't we just get the ball and run? But maybe if that's not him anymore, then maybe he could kind of assume more of the Newman kind of stable, the guy to go to when you just need a good kick.
Yeah, I don't mind that because, the Saad discussion's very interesting. He's had those soft tissue injuries now. So is it just a case of he can't be that explosive player for a full game? You have to use him differently, potentially. as bad as the loss of Newman is, and it's massive. He's been so big in so many moments for us. It's probably the one position we're most stacked at, and it's potentially the easiest position to replace in general. I mean, my back 6 or 7 before that was basically, you've got your Wiedering, McGovern, Haynes, Sard, Newman, Cowan, and now Hollands was basically how I was looking at it. You take Newman away, it's probably Boyd comes in as that next best in. Potentially Chincotta could have been in there as well, but he's not going to be there for round 1. So that makes it a little bit maybe more easier for a guy like Jordan Boyd to take over that role. I think a guy like Lockie Cowan can really take that next step again this season and be more like what Nic Newman was, where if you need him to defend, that's his bread and butter. If you need him to attack, he's got no problem going forward. He's another lovely kick. Role-wise, I see Cowan maybe stepping up in that role, but personnel-wise, I think at the moment it's Boyd. But then just list a million guys, does Wilson get a look at some stage? We've just, picked up Carroll, who can kind of play in that back half. Charleston is another one. These maybe not ready to play just yet, but depth chart-wise, their names on the list that can play half-back. Doherty, like you said, can go back down there. Williams, if we're desperate. Silvani's now training as a defender. Can he play a little bit smaller in a lockdown role? Jagger, do they throw him down halfback to start his career? Ben Camporelli, can he play a bit? Weirdly, I can see a guy like Cottrell as well if we got ridiculously desperate. Is someone that I like the look of him with a bit of dash off halfback. So I think personnel-wise, we're sorted with the amount of guys. It's just how much are we regressing by bringing that next guy in? Where do you see the gap between Newman and the next guy? And is it Jordan Boyd for you taking that next step in?
Well, that's the funny thing. He's been such a integral kind of cog to this team for what I can remember. I almost need to see it without him before I can kind of quantify how crucial he was. I could imagine us a month into the season being like, wow, you realize how much we miss him. And maybe
8 out of 10 every single week was a Nic Newman. And how many guys in our backline, I'll put this question out to you now with absolutely no preparation. Go through that, back 6 or 7 without Newman. How many of those would you rely on an 8 out of 10 every single week? Who are they? Wiedering. Can you? Yes. McGovern?
No.
No. Haynes, haven't seen him. I'd say no. Sard, closer to it, probably just not. Cowan, for what he's bringing, yes. But is that a Newman 8 out of 10? Probably not. That's where I'd say the regression is, but at least I like his output. Ollie Hollands, close, but probably not. Not many of these guys, I think you can guarantee you're getting their best almost every single week. And maybe that will be the thing we'll lose the most.
It's true. But if I'm going to take a glass half full, it is going to force us to look different down there. And that's exciting. And like I said, I think we'll have to reflect on it a little bit into the season and see how it gets, how that gap gets plugged. Doherty's a weird one to me. When I look at our midfield mix, it's really hard for me to see him actually being in there.
Yeah, well, I want to ask this question because I think it ties in well. Looking at the fact that Ollie Hollands is now basically a defender, that means a wing role opens up. Is that as simple as Doherty? Is that where you're seeing his role? Or would you rather Doc back, Ollie goes to the wing? Does the injury change how you see Ollie Hollands' role at all?
Probably not. Then it's hard for me to always disconnect as well when we know that Holland is working with the backs for me to then say, no, keep him on the wing. Or, like Kemp, no, keep Kemp back. Because I'm kind of just bought into the actual narrative. Obviously, Cottrell is a wing contender. I always wonder about Walsh too. As we get more kind of guys in the mix inside, whether he's a guy for out there. Yeah, but like I said, Doherty's just the name where it's like, I don't know. I just picture him in the back line playing his best footy for us.
I guess we need leadership and someone that can be similar. He has that in spades. It's going to be interesting. I think I still see him on the wing, probably because we've moved Ollie
Okay.
Hollins. If not, I probably would have said where maybe one short and Doherty goes there. I think we'll see Doherty play everywhere throughout the season. But
Me
right
too.
now, I've got him as that other winger. But I feel so bad saying it.
Okay.
Would not surprise me if halfway through this season, he's not in our best 22.
That would not surprise me.
I mean, what is he, 31 at the moment? Someone might need to fact check that, but definitely in his 30s, coming back off another ACL. We just don't know what player we're getting. And that's, for me, the toughest thing. And maybe, like you're saying, does that suit a halfback role rather than a really heavy running wing midfield spot that's a lot more taxing on the body? Potentially, we might see that halfback role working better, but it's definitely going to be a watch this space. I want to kind of pivot the question slightly and talk about the fact that there was murmurs with Nic Newman saying he wasn't training as a halfback. He was this more wing midfielder that I never really got proper confirmation of, but those supposed in the nose were very much saying that that's what his role was because we wanted better inside 50s. If that was the role he was training in all preseason and he was not a halfback, let's just say this for a hypothetical sense, how would you replace him as that best kick inside 50 to fix the one thing that you wanted fixed heading into the year?
It's really true. That's a hard thing to think about because I don't know whether it's the inside 50 thing to me feels less of a skill problem and more of a like it's more between the ears than it is on the foot. You think about some of the inside 50s that Newman has had, like he's had a lot of memorable, really quality inside 50s. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, to be honest, because you think about all our mids. I guess maybe Chera's one that stands out that he's often is a good decision maker going inside 50. So hopefully having him back is part of that. But I don't know. I also was not sold on the Newman playing that role either. That felt a bit crazy when I heard that.
Yeah, it felt very strange when I heard it just because he's been so integral down back. It makes sense in the thinking of, well, we've got enough cover down back potentially, which is the world we're living in now anyway. So I can kind of see the positivity in that. I like that we're trying something different if that was the case.
Me too.
Like we spoke about, what are those next little tweaks in the game plan or positional changes to take that next step? Maybe that was one with Nic Newman. Do we have a player like that? Don't think so. You look at Doherty, he's not the greatest by foot. Walsh, Cottrell, Binns, none of these guys are amazing. Ollie Hollins through there, he's not amazing either. I just think you have to go back to what you already have rather than trying to emulate Nic Newman. And maybe it's as simple as just that Doherty, bigger body, inside mid wing rotation. I don't have a great answer for it either, but I'd love to know if anyone else does. Leave it in the comments. But speaking of Walsh, also he's had a bit of an injury, the hamstring. He's out for at least a month. Might be a bit touch and go for round one. He's again unable to make a full preseason, get that under his belt. Very frustrating. How do you feel about Sam Walsh heading into the season, knowing that he isn't as primed as he potentially could be?
It's weird looking back on his, I mean, it feels weird to say looking back on his career because he's still so young, but you remember how he was like the Iron Man his first 3 years. Don't think he missed a game in his first 3. And then you look at the amount of games that he's played and he still actually has hardly missed any games. It's just always preseason and that affecting him going into the season. So that's disappointing, I guess. But yeah, I mean, what can you say? Like, this is a bit more of a broader topic of injuries, but just to bring it up, like it feels like there's more injuries in the whole league at the moment. Yeah. I don't know if you're feeling that. Like this feels like a particularly bad preseason. So we can't sit here and go, like we're never going to have any injuries. But like you said, it's just annoying when it's your best players and not the 40th guy.
No, I agree with that. With the amount of injuries going around, it feels like every day there's someone's done a soft tissue and they're going to miss the next couple of weeks at least compared to normal. And I think the frustrating thing for Walshy is just he's had so many niggles. You just wanted him to get a clean run and just to see what that would do. I have no doubt that Walshy will be fine and he'll play out majority of the season. But you just wanted to know what he'd be like without that interruption. Very frustrating. But the next man who it's interesting now that Newman has gone down, Cincotta with the hip issue, he'll miss the start of the season. What role did you see Cincotta playing this year? And has that changed at all for you now, knowing that we've lost a key cog in defense? That's probably the question I have around Cincotta this year.
Oh, I mean, before all this, I had absolutely no idea what we were going to get from him in 2025. I think of him as so different to Newman, so I probably don't think about them in the same conversation. It's funny because he did some really quality tag jobs last year. And I guess the fondest memories that I have of him in 2024 was playing forward on an important defender and also hitting the scoreboard. Like that was peak him to me. But it's kind of hard to imagine that role in this team in 2025, like at full strength. I just don't feel like he's a best 23 player anyway.
Yeah, I probably agree with you on that last statement. I think he's very borderline best 23. He's there. He's a good player.
He is.
And he will play football this year, but if everyone's fit, I probably don't have him in the lineup. I am somewhat disagree with you in where I see his role. I think I like him primarily as a defender. I think some of his jobs on Bobby Hill, Cozzy Pickett, he's completely shut them out of games and probably something we might need in this team at some stage. And with losing a guy like Newman, I was more seeing it as in, well, we've lost a number, so someone has to step in. And who's your next best? If you need a stopper, he can definitely have that role. And that's probably why I see him more likely to play defense this year. But because he's not in our best 23 and maybe Boyd takes that role straight away, maybe that works with you and you can see him play a variety of positions, but just not ideal for him to not be available come round one. Now, man of the hour, as of recording today, there was an absolute almighty scare. You're lucky you slept through this, Lockie, and you didn't have to deal with trying to check your phone every minute for updates. I've never been so stressed in my life. Charlie Curnow, now he had obviously this sort of knee issue, had surgery, went in for a little bit of a cleanup, and then looked like it was all going to be fine. Get the cleanup done. Then there were murmurs of, oh, he's re-injured it. He's no good. Nothing eventuated from that. He was out there training, reintegrating back with the group. But then today, absolutely almighty scare. He's gone down. He's gone in for scans. Luckily, about 5 minutes later, no structural damage. Thank you, Riley Beveridge, for easing every Carlton supporter out there. But I think regardless of at what degree it is, because I know I was kind of speculating at the present, we don't have any information. Are you concerned at all about Charlie knowing he's got this history of knee injuries and that he isn't going to be there at the start of the season? Keen to know your thoughts on that. And then if he isn't available, how do you see that forward line shaping up and who potentially does replace him round one?
Wow. Yeah, the second part's harder to that question because definitely I'm worried. It shows with guys like him in the team, like we can't take them for granted. Like, yeah, he was obviously not 100% for part of last season, and that was impacting his performance. And he was still one of the best forwards in the entire comp. So I guess maybe the more interesting question for me, not to,
absolutely shit on my run sheet. Fair enough.
And maybe the question for you would be, do you see him as being a player that we can just put somebody else in his role? Or does him going out of the team change the way that we do things?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, you can't replace Charlie Curnow. because he offers so much variety in what I think he's able to do. I think Harry Mackay is the only one in the team that can do basically what Charlie does to a degree, in the sense of he can go up the ground, take that mark, wheel and go, beautiful kick, set us up. He can be deep, take the mark, kick the goals. We don't have anyone else that can kind of do that. Our key forward depth is thin. The one thing you might be able to plug and play is, well, if we've still got Harry who can go up high and be that guy on the wing to take the mark and get it going, Kemp can, from what we've kind of seen, maybe his strength is to stay at home and be that goal square player. So I don't know if I've answered it greatly, but I think it probably just opens the door for Kemp to definitely be in this team. I had him borderline at the moment. I wasn't sure how he was going to fit in. So right now I see if he's not available round one, then it's Kemp and Harry. Kemp is deep, and you're adjusting things slightly with how you're going to play, but that's probably more because I just don't know what Kemp is. So I don't know how much he can emulate to any degree what Charlie does, but I'm really interested to know how you see this.
Well, that's kind of the caveat to answering this question, is whether you see Kemp as being a third tall in this team or not, which to me, I'm imagining that he is. And
I think the coaches have him there. I personally don't have him there.
Yeah, and if you don't, then it kind of makes that question a bit easier, because then, you say that we're rolling with the two. But so then do you think that Pitto is playing round one? Oh, yeah, round one.
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. I had that note here is, just Pitto come in, then De Koning can play a little bit down forward. Or, I mean, the last time we saw Mark Pittonet,
I was just going to say that.
He was slotting goals. So maybe
he's full forward.
Maybe it works. Maybe something is triggered in him that he's now the greatest forward of all time. I don't love it. I don't love the dual ruck that way. Maybe it has to happen because you could play Harry in the ruck because you had Charlie. Do you like Harry in the ruck when it's just Kemp down there? Is that too small? Potentially. There's going to be times that Pitto and TDK play this year, and Pitto's still a really solid player, and it's going to work well for us. I'd say to fence it massively, I'm still confident in any of those concoction of players that I trust will still win with anyone regardless. But I mean, Charlie's a massive loss if he's not there. It's just, I don't know how much I can trust Kemp in that role, and I know Lemmy's not up to it just yet. So you just need Charlie out there. How are you playing that forward line?
Yeah, well, that's where my mind's at. I think you make a really good point with the rucks. I think if we're going to win the flag this year, if we are then going to have a game plan that is reliant on specific archetypes in specific spots, that is not the way to go.
Yes,
because
agreed.
There's going to be, like you said, there's going to be games this season where it's TDK and Harry, Pitto and TDK, probably Pitto and Harry. Like, there's going to be so many different combinations of the ruck, which has run-on effects to the forward line. I just don't think it can be that, well, if Charlie's not in, then here's his replacement. And if that guy's not ready, here's it. Every game's going to be different.
Well, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. Say Charlie's out for a couple of weeks. I don't want to go any further than that or entertain that in my brain at all. But okay, we've got Kempy down there. We've got Harry. Would you prefer a Pitto De Koning matchup so you've got someone else to go down there, or would you like Jack Silvani to get thrown back into the forward line? Because we know this. He's training as a defender. If there's injuries, everything can switch. You can throw guys around. Would you prefer one of Pitt and De Koning in the forward line, or Silvani in there with Kemp and Harry?
Yeah, off the top of my head, it would be the former scenario, because I know that I do not want TDK to be the number one ruck for the entire season. So if we're forced into this scenario, then I would say, all right, this therefore means we play the hand of Pito in the ruck, Harry, Kemp, TDK as kind of like the main forwards.
Because I like the idea of the Sauce one, which is why I'm still so against him being a defender, because of his ability to pinch hit in the ruck. Now all of a sudden you've got him that can do a job. You've got Harry that can do it. So kind of Harry can now, with that, stay as a forward. Sauce is better than Pito as a forward. So I kind of like that dynamic. Plus, look at that West Coast game when we were a little bit of a smaller forward line. We had to use the ball a bit smarter inside 50. We had to be more dynamic with our movement inside 50. I don't mind the idea of us having to go smaller than us just plugging in a big beast that way. So I think I would go the Sauce over Pito. But again, like you're kind of saying, there's going to be matchups where we need the two rucks. So that's probably going to mean if that happens when Charlie's not there, we roll with that.
But don't you think, and maybe this isn't what you're saying, but don't you think that Sauce can pinch hit in the ruck from defense in a scenario where TDK is the number one?
I guess my scenario has Sauce not in the team. Right. He's either not in the team because he's not in our best defenders, or I guess I'll throw another scenario out there. If this is happening, would you say, okay, well now Sauce has to be the third tall defender so he can pinch hit? How is that scenario tier listing for you?
Well, when you mentioned Haynes earlier in your kind of like defenders list, I'm far less sold on him being a walk-up starter than maybe you are.
I have to kind of go off what they're doing at the club.
Yeah, I know. That's the weird thing, isn't it?
I still have Kemp above Haynes, but he's not playing. Yeah. I know round one he's not going to line up as the defenders. So if it's J-Sauce or Haynes, I got to go him because I don't think it's Lewis Young either, who we kind of always forget about in these discussions with defenders, even though that his last performance, I'd say he was in our top half best players in that Brisbane final. I thought Lewis Young was really solid. But yeah, if I'm picking between Lewis Young, Sauce, Haynes, it's Haynes at the moment. But I agree with you. I'm not loving that either. And maybe that's a reason why we can't win the flag this year, potentially, if you're going to find one.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think this discussion is a positive one. Like, these are all, to me, good options. This isn't us, like, this isn't bottom of the barrel stuff here. This is a lot of scenarios that actually could work really well.
Yeah. I know we've kind of talked on this for a little bit, but is this where all of a sudden a guy like Ashton Moyer finds a spot in the team?
Sure.
Because he's a little bit taller, can be another just dynamic marking target, whereas maybe before he wasn't in that starting lineup. Now all of a sudden, well, he's better than maybe throwing a Durden in who's small. And there's just a lot of different variations. I like when you have a bad scenario and you have to try and figure something out, and now you've learned something for the future, and you've just got another thing you can put on the tool belt whenever you need it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, Charlie plays round one. This isn't something we have to deal with, but maybe we've planned for it and we've had a look. We've got something to go for. But talking about the injuries to round this all up, touched on it a little bit, but are we cursed, Lockie? Because we've got another injury in Newman to a best 22 player out for the season in the preseason. We've got a few injuries to Curnow, to Walsh, some of our better players. Chincotta's gone down as well. Are we cursed? Do we always just have a ridiculous amount of injury? We've got a new strength and conditioning team. Doesn't seem to matter. The injuries keep piling up, Lockie. That's what everyone is telling me. Is the fitness team to blame? What is it? Or does every team deal with these problems? Are we just putting the blue tinted glasses on when it comes and thinking it only happens to us? How do you sit on this injury curse that seems to keep happening?
I'm going to assume that you've put this one in the run sheet as another let's see if Locke says something super clickbaity and, throw me under the bus here. I'm going to say no.
Let's hope so.
We're not cursed. Definitely need to give Rob some time with this group to see what can happen. Like we said earlier, it seems like every team at the moment is having these problems. And, with Inners coming in, like he is potentially needing to undo and change the habits that have been built up over a long period of time.
That's a big perspective. I love to hear, Lockie. That's huge.
I mean, it's kind of the optimistic thought on the matter. Yeah. But you know what it's like with, if it is something that's habitual and something that's been built into these guys, like, I don't know, who do you want to talk about? Like, if it feels like, I don't know if I want to go down here, but like
go for
Walshy, for example.
Yeah.
Everything we hear about Walshy is that he is just one of the hardest workers that there ever has been. And he is seemingly having a bunch of these problems in different preseasons. Like, does he need some time to change some of his habits that might make him potentially more durable? Completely hypothetical, but these things take time, I think.
It's a nice argument. I think the Carlton supporters will like it because it feels like it's tied to Andrew Russell bashing, in the sense of you could make it if you wanted to, which I'm going to because I think it's fun, but say he's been breaking down because he wants to work really hard, and he's been, to a degree, encouraged to push himself to a point. And maybe Rob looks at this and says, where I see you pushing yourself to is slightly back. But as you're saying in this hypothetical scenario, Walshy still thinks it's here. And so he's getting to a point with his body where previously he's gone, this is where I'm going to keep going. Rob's saying, no, pull it back. But he's not getting the time to do that because we've built in these patterns. There's a chance for that. I mean, I'm just going to flat out say, this is not an injury crisis. We've potentially got the healthiest list we've got heading into a season ever. How many times have you heard players in interviews come out and say, we've never had this many blokes to train with in preseason? And now a part of that is simply not having Jack Martin, Cunningham, Marchbank, those geezers on the list. It helps a lot, but I want to kind of go through it. I mean, the Newman one really taints it because it's a guy out for the season. And we, apart from the season 2020, since 2018, we've had a guy injured in preseason out for the year, which is crazy to think about. When I don't know how many clubs have had that. That would take me way too long to find out. So can Sir Swamp Thing please find out how many teams lose a player out for the season in preseason, go back from 2018. I feel like we'd be very high up there, which is why we probably feel cursed in that sense, and it being a big player. You look at Doherty twice. You got Zach Williams through there. It's not good. It's not good when it happens. Apart from that, you got Chincotta that'll miss maybe the first month. Should be fine for the rest of the season. Everyone else should probably play round one. The question marks are on Charlie and Walsh, but everyone at this stage seems to be, well, they'll probably play round one or maybe miss one game of football. So with that, that's pretty healthy list. And go through every other list right now. I tried to see who has some injuries. So apologies if this is very dry content, but Essendon have got a couple. Ridley, Guelphy, Davey are all struggling for round one. Fremantle, Bolton, Darcy, Young, Walker. Gold Coast have got Flanders and Rioli. GWS have got Cornelio. Hawthorn, Kalshadir. Melbourne, Tholstrup, Melksham, Petrarca. North Melbourne have just had Wardlaw go down with a hamstring injury. Port, they've got Marshall out for the year. St Kilda, my God, if it wasn't already hell being a supporter of this football club, I can't imagine they're having a good time now. Howard, Filippo, Henry, Dow, Taru, and then scares in the same training session, King, Sinclair, and Wood. They've been said they're not serious, those three, but who knows the damage. Sydney have got McDonald and Detoli. West Coast, Yo and Sheed then out for the year. Bulldogs have got Jones, Johannesen, and Trelaw. So every team seems to have three or four of these guys that most of them are in their best 22. I pretty much didn't name a bunch of players that no one's ever heard of when they're not playing round one. This is the in contention to play kind of guys. Feels like apart from an out for the season, we're looking pretty decent in this, and maybe we're not as cursed as we think we are.
Great from you. That was really good.
If you want me to go harder, Lockie, at least if you want to look at the Nic Newman injury as a positive, it's just a luck injury.
Yeah.
That is not a Mate, we've been working him too hard and he's done a stress fracture in his back after he already knew he had a back problem. It's not old mate's had a history of hamstring issues and he's done another one. This is freak accident. Sometimes it just happens. You cannot stop that injury from occurring. It's just luck. So maybe we are unlucky with these knee injuries, but I mean, that's football. I think every team, if you ask every supporter, they'd say they're unlucky with injuries. So it is really hard to take your Carlton lens off sometimes and think maybe we are in a good spot with where this list is conditioned going into this year.
It's over 40 blokes rigorously training and preparing their bodies for an entire season of footy. Let's just remember how inevitable it is as a bunch of humans. I know it feels like a stupid comment, but you watch the footage from the open training, so it's like these boys, they're going hard at each other.
It's a contact sport. Injuries will happen. They're pushing themselves to the limit. I think I'm going to touch all the wood possible in this room, but I think the positive has to be not on that. You can't be looking at the injuries that you do have when there's not many. It needs to be the perspective flipped and say, mate, Chera, Williams, these kind of guys that have had some issues, they're flying at the moment. This is great news that this is happening rather than looking at it the other way. At least that's where I'm trying to be positive because no footy's been played. I can't be depressed because we haven't lost yet. So I'm going to stay in this fantasy land of Carlton are amazing. We're going to win the flag until I'm given the evidence to knock me back. But let's stay in this positive vibe for once. I'm not going to dismantle the positivity on the pod. Let's talk about some fun contracts, Lockie, because we love a fairy tale story, and this is one of them. Matt Jeff Carroll is back on the list. How good is this? A man that was picked up in the rookie draft, injured, missed basically the whole season, gets delisted, gets told there might be a spot if you want to train, which mentally as a youngster, that's got to be really tough to deal with. And it takes a lot to come back, put in the hard work when you're not guaranteed anything. And I love the most with this guy that in the Summer Sessions podcast, so many players have mentioned him as someone who has impressed on the training field, that's doing really well, not someone you probably expected. So what are your thoughts on Matt Carroll getting his list spot back? And then also with this news, Sam Durden has been let go. He's no longer training with us. So I'm intrigued to know your thoughts on the whole SSP as it stands now.
I hope you're not too intrigued because I'm not going to give you anything.
You're telling me you don't know a lot about Matt Carroll. You haven't seen a lot of him play.
You got Matt Carroll round one. Slot him in.
Why not?
Slot him in. I mean, my biggest takeaway from what you just said just then is if, he is having a positive impact on the overall group and, pushing others to being better and just helping build the overall culture, then that's a great thing. And I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I think like we have often say with players like this, if he or Sam Durden was going to have to play a key role this year, then we might be in strife.
I agree. He ideally does not play any AFL football, and that's nothing bad on him. That's just simply allowing him to develop more because he didn't play last season. As soon as I saw the Newman injury, I thought, okay, this opens up another list spot. It makes a lot of sense to give Matt Carroll this opportunity, give him a full season in the VFL and see what he can do. And then we can make another assessment after that year's happened. And if he hasn't taken the step, we'll deal with it then. But I think you always just like those feel-good stories. And
absolutely,
when he had that rug pulled out from under him, when he wasn't able to prove himself, he was in rehab all year. That must feel so difficult from a mental perspective, knowing that you didn't even get a real chance to prove yourself. Yeah. So I'm very happy for Matt Carroll. Now we've got a little bit of a couple of contract extensions. One, Adam Chera, 5-year contract extension. What are your thoughts on the deal? There was a little bit of positivity, a little bit of unsureness with this contract extension, probably because of the length of the deal. How did you see this? Are you positive on the re-signing of Adam Chera?
Well, I know that when you put this in the run sheet, you already know my view on us talking about contracts and things like that. Like, it is one of my just least favorite things that gets discussed.
Well, we've got a few
in the
more, so
media.
I hope you are absolutely strapped in, Lockie, because we're doing it.
Well, it's just because it's just all nuance about it is removed when you talk about things like this. Like,
Absolutely.
that's why I just find it so frustrating. If there was more transparency, which I would love to see, then I would find it a much more interesting conversation. But it's just so not interesting to me, because do you think that, or this isn't really a question to you, it's to the question to the person that thinks that this is a bad contract. Like, do you think that Carlton think that Ches is going to play every game for the next 5 seasons? Do you think that they, have set this contract up so that Carlton are completely vulnerable to him never being the same player he was again? Of course not. Like, that's just not the way that this thing goes. So am I happy that Ches is more likely than not going to be at Carlton for the next 5 years? Absolutely. I love him. Do I think that he's going to be 2023 Chera in 5 years? No.
See, this is why I love asking you these questions, Lockie, because I want this perspective. I want to open the floor to you so you can give maybe a little bit of sensibility to this, because I agree with you. Like, he's had his injury issues clearly over the last 12 months. The 5 years shows me how confident they are that this is not a long-term, he's going to be doing a hamstring every time he steps out on the field. They clearly think there was a mismanagement of him rather than it being himself having this problem, or he's over it with this treatment in Qatar and it's all good, or he's on genuinely $5 a day and therefore maybe that could be a lot. Who knows in the grand scheme of things for some of these players. But all of a sudden, he's being paid peanuts. So this is great. We'll have him for 10 years if he's getting paid nothing, because if he gets injured, we can just wipe him clean. But I can understand the frustration. Maybe frustration's not the word, but the skepticism on the deal when you see 5 years for a guy that had, 6 hamstring injuries in a 12-month period. You start to go, whoa, long-term deal for a guy that we don't know if he's back from the injury. But where probably the nuance comes into it is, okay, 5 years means other clubs were probably offering him a similar term deal. So to keep him, you've got to offer him a similar term in years. Also, normally when you sign 5 rather than a 3, which probably would have been ideal, means he's on less money. That is pretty much why you get these longer term deals, because you can just spread that money out and he's probably earning less. This contract could end up looking amazing, where instead of having to pay Chera, let's say $800 a year for 3 years, we're now paying him $400 for 5 years and being able to bring in other players instead. That sounds like an absolute win to me.
We've talked about more guests on the pod in 2025. Write this down, that we need to get either like an ex-list manager or an agent on the show.
I like that.
I want us to be able to, for our understanding, but then also to put out to the people, like, how intricate is a contract like this? Like, if he plays 5 games in the next 2 seasons because of all the injuries, is his contract the same for those last 3 years? Like, I'm keen to understand more of those intricacies. There has to be.
It really could be. I think I feel like it wouldn't be that stringent, because with the way they look after the players now, he probably just wouldn't sign a deal if he was not going to be paid a lot in those last few years if he didn't play at all. He probably just would have gone, nah, that's too much of a risk. He probably would have tried to be a bit more secure. But I think to a lesser degree, there's probably some triggers of, hey, in your 4th year of this contract, if you've played, 17 games in those 3 years, you will continue to get, you'll get 800 this year rather than 600. That can be something that can potentially happen, but I don't think it would vary in a massive, massive degree.
No, and I was being hyperbolic in my example, but it's just
his contract's null and void if he doesn't hit 15 games next year.
Yeah, null and void. Yeah, exactly. No, I just think that there's more nuance to this conversation than we give credit for.
Yeah. It's difficult when you don't know the terms of the deal, or at least the money from a base rate to start with in the discussion.
Right?
But we're going to keep
don't-
talking about him, Lockie, because Adam Sard has signed a 1-year contract extension. Thoughts on the deal? He'll be 31 this year, had a few soft tissue injuries the last couple of seasons. We're happy to re-sign these guys. Question mark would be on the longevity of the deal. Are you surprised it's only 1 year for Adam Sard and not more?
Am I surprised? I would have had to put thought into it to be surprised or not.
Typical.
I mean, I just don't get the sense at all that he won't. Wait, am I wording this right? I think he's going to finish his career with us.
Yes.
I don't see any world where he leaves us. So I'm really not fazed by the approach taken here. He's still a great player, and I hope that, he can, I don't know, be even better in 2025 with Newey going down. I'm really not bothered by the length.
Yeah, it does feel one of those where he might just be on those 1-year contracts, roll him around every single year, see how he's feeling. Maybe there's a perspective that he doesn't want to maybe go on, rather than it being this Carlton perspective that we often see in, we've only signed him 1 year because we want him for one. Maybe Sardi's going, I'm 31. There's other things I want to do outside of footy. I don't know where I'm going to be in 2-3 years. I think I'm going to be good. You think I'm going to be good. Let's just roll these 1 year and we'll see how we feel. There's a chance for that. I was maybe slightly surprised in thinking 2 would have been, just lock him down. But he is 31. He has had some injury issues. I think it benefits us quite well. If he doesn't play a lot this year and he regresses, then we can kind of just say, no worries, goodbye. If he has another good year, I agree with you. I don't think he's going anywhere. We can offer him another 1 year deal and do it all again. But it's just nice, I think, to start the year with some of these guys already signed up. It just takes a little bit of that pressure away. However, there's one more contract we need to talk about. It is Tom de Koning, because he has not re-signed yet. He's the hot free agent, Lockie. So news won't stop talking about. St Kilda are throwing everything at him. At this rate, he's the only fit player that'll be able to play for him. But how are you feeling in regards to the Tom de Koning contract? I guess his status going into 2025. Are you confident that he will re-sign? Are you nervous that he hasn't so far? I'm just keen to get your thoughts on that.
It's really hard for me to separate my Carlton Nuffyism with this one, I reckon, because I think it's more, to me, I think it's more likely than not that he'll stay. But then when I hear anyone that isn't Carlton related talking about it, they think that he'll leave.
Interesting.
So
have you heard any reasons why?
The money. It just pretty much just that we, in theory, won't be able to give him as much as another team could. That's my gut feel. What's your gut telling you?
My gut's saying that he'll re-sign simply for, and I guess I have the perspective of, I believe we'll be good again this year. So there's not that reason to leave. If we're bad, then okay, maybe he goes, okay, you guys aren't taking that step I thought you would, I'll go somewhere else, which you can maybe just understand to a degree. But I still see us on the rise. I still see us being in this 3 to 5 year premiership window. He's been here for the tough part of that. Why would you go now when we're peaking? It just feels silly. You've built the relationship with those players. There's no guarantee you'll go somewhere and win. How many players don't win at a club, move to win, and it ends up working? Doesn't always happen. You can think sometimes about, poor Deledio leaving Richmond and it happening that way. There's no guarantees. To just leave for money, it feels like that's the decision more than leaving to win. Well, who's he going to? Who needs a ruckman that's got money? St Kilda's the team that goes the most linked to him at the moment. Is that where you'd want to go? And I know I talk shit about St Kilda a lot. And most of it is genuinely in jest because I've almost built this character of myself as such a St Kilda hater, which it's true to an extent, but I definitely put some mayo on it.
I was going to say,
it's definitely there.
Swerve away from that.
But I want to be kind of serious in this thing of they're probably not really looking to compete for a few years now. So you'd be leaving a club to take a step down for money. Is that the kind of guy De Koning is? I'm not sold on that. I feel like if he would leave, it'd be money in Geelong to play with maybe his brother, if that is something he wants to do. But I just think he'll stay. I'm not really worried at this stage about it. I'll be worried if it gets to about the midway of the season and he hasn't re-signed, because normally that's after the buys have happened. If he hasn't re-signed, okay, things could happen. But I want to kind of pivot this conversation to ask, how important do you think it is for us to keep hold of him? You know, if that price tag starts to jump up and we can't match it, do we have to, is he that kind of player that we have to just find a way to get that money and make it happen?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. The way I kind of tried to think about this was, and oh God, this is like off the top of my head this morning, so this might be the absolute worst content ever. But I thought about if there was like a top tier of players that I'd be most devastated if they left.
Is this just emotionally or what their impact on the team?
Kind of both, because I think it's, I don't know if you can actually separate them. I have 7 players in the top tier. Do you want to guess who they are?
7. So you've got 7 that you'd be devastated.
Well, I mean, no. There's 40 that I'd be devastated. But this is the top tier of, like, I think would be the most, the worst for our club if they left.
Yeah. Let me write this down. Let me try and number them. You said there was 7?
Yeah. And
well,
I haven't got them.
I've got a hot 5 already in Cripps, Walsh, Charlie, Harry, Wiedering.
Yeah.
2 more past that, because that's sort of my top. I think he'd probably be there. And then I think the other one would be... Ooh, I feel like I've probably forgotten someone very obvious.
No, I think this is probably the hottest one. I'd put Jagger in there as well.
Yeah, that probably makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about him, but I thought he hasn't played a game, so you probably don't have him there. No, yeah. I think he is in the top 6 of us right now.
Right?
So is
when
that...
when I think about it like that, it makes me more inclined to say, I hate this line, but keep him at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a little bit of a scenario for you, or at least a bit of information, which you probably see in front of you because I've got it there on the run sheet. It's no surprise, but
the secret run sheet.
When looking at the ruck, well, then most of them are secret. Normally, I don't send them to at all. But
yes,
when you look at the last 10 Premiership, the last 10 ruckmen to win a Premiership Lockie, I'll list them for you. We've got Darcy Fort, Darcy Cameron. Maybe we need a Darcy. Maybe that's a secret to winning a flag. Reece Stanley, Max Gawn, Toby Nankervis did it 3 times, Scott Lysette, Jordan Roughhead, absolute weapon, and then David Hale twice. Apart from Max Gawn, he's really the only elite ruckman. Potentially Hale you could throw in there as close to it. Nankervis incredibly solid, but he's not, the top 3 ruckman in the comp at the time of winning it. Is that evidence that shows you maybe we don't necessarily need this elite ruckman? If he's getting bounded at this ridiculous price tag, being paid as one of the best, is this an area where maybe, even though he is really important to us, there's better value not having to break the bank? If you're looking at the opportunity cost of having to pay him big money or losing him, and those are the only 2 scenarios, you can't do anything else. Looking at what wins a premiership, are we better off in this scenario not paying up for a big ruckman?
I think this is a really strong example if you were wanting to make the case against him. I totally see that as valid. I guess I just don't even necessarily see him as just a ruckman for us. Like for what we've seen as the best of him, he is truly another midfielder.
Yeah. That is 100% where I see it as well. So no, sorry, keep going.
No, I didn't have much more to add. Like, it's just, I just don't see him as somebody that's just in there to win a hit out and then just jog around.
Yeah, I think he's so different because of the team we have. And it's such a weird thing, but if you look at our midfield right now, Cripps, Hewitt, Chera, Walsh, Jagger, there's not necessarily that ridiculously speedy guy in there. And it's been the kryptonite for us so many times. It's the big narrative. They're one paced. You had Kennedy in there as well. You can throw Cooper Lord to replace Kennedy in this scenario. They need some speed in there. They are so one paced in the midfield. Well, I think the thing that clearly changes our one pace midfield is De Koning. And it's probably the reason we need to keep him more than anything else is he's the point of difference we have in midfield. He's the reason that midfield takes a step up because he isn't just a Mark Pitternet stand and tap ruckman, not to throw shade at Pitternet, but he adds something else. He is that dynamic player. If we were to get rid of De Koning for this Moneyball method that says you don't need an elite ruckman and you can bring in a standalone, simple tap guy, I don't think our midfield works with that. I think, unfortunately, we've built a midfield around the players we have, and that is De Koning with his athleticism and what he offers. So I think it would be a bigger blow than being able to just win it with a bog standard ruckman. Because I think it hurts our midfield more. Style of play wise.
I agree. Like with the names that you mentioned, it's hard for me to go back to the Hawthorn years, but Gawn is one of the only players there that you look at and say he was a key reason why they won the flag.
Yeah.
And I think if we win the flag this year, TDK will be one of the top few reasons.
Yeah. And hopefully he does resign. I think we're both confident that he will. Let's not entertain the fact that he'll leave. Let's just get that out of
so positive
the universe. Well, positive for now. You'll wait till half the way through the season when we've had a almighty capitulation, and then we're very sad again. But fingers crossed that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, we're going kind of negative. Maybe you can look at it as a positive, but we have to touch on it to some degree. Maybe touch is not the best word I want to use when bringing this up, but we've got a new president, Lockie. Luke Stayers has stepped down, and we now have a new president in Robert Priestley. Now, he is someone that came into the club after the David Teague review. That's when he arrived.
Yeah.
Clearly, the club have made this appointment with that stability in mind, bringing someone that's already at the club, already got the vision. I'm interested in to get your thoughts on this appointment and what maybe you wanted from a new president here. Do you think that this was the right move, Lockie?
It's hard for me to answer that last question, obviously not knowing a whole lot about him and who the real other candidates were. But I'm happy right now. Like I said, I liked the things that I heard from him in his little introduction, and he's obviously had quite a successful career in the business world. I think on the first part of your question though, and this is a little bit of a Sayers reflection. I think for me as a Nuffy, one of the things that I want most from the president of Carlton is the engagement with the members and fans.
Yeah.
And I remember when Sayers started and we saw the first few times that he spoke, and I felt like he was going to be this super engaged guy with us. And it just didn't happen like I thought it would. So before this appointment was made, and as I was thinking about like what I want in that next president, I hope that it was going to be somebody who, one, is doing it for the right reason because they would die for Carlton. And hearing Robert's story, it seems like that does fit him, which is great. And then that's that one thing for me is I want a president that is going to like celebrate the highs closely with us, and then also be there for the lows.
I hadn't thought about it like that at all, to be honest. And I'm glad you have brought that train of thought to me, because I do remember we had this massive Teague era where we were just sick of not hearing anything from the club, and all we'd get is an email. And I remember it was a massive discussion in the online space, particularly with the podcast and everything. Everyone was saying, it's, we've all got a phone. We can all film our thoughts. Why is everything just a little email? How hard is it to just be in front of a camera, film something for 2 seconds and give us your thoughts, say something, be present? And I understand you don't always need to be in the public eye. And sometimes that's just not some people's MO. They are a behind closed doors operator. They're in the boardroom getting everything happening, and they don't like the public side of it. But I think when you're a club as big as Carlton, you need to be public, because I think that's what the fans want, and I think that's what will resonate with. And maybe ultimately the success of the football club, it doesn't matter if they're vocal, it's what they're doing in the boardroom, making those decisions. But as a fan, I agree with you. I want someone that does engage with us. It's not just one video one time when you're announced and then you don't really hear from them. And then there's long patches where you're like, has he done a media interview to say anything? And as much as Carl's, we don't like him, like an Eddie Maguire, that kind of just
great
nuts,
example.
Clearly biased person.
Great example.
He's deep down who you kind of want. Like, it's why you liked,
100%.
Dick Pratt when he was there. It's why these big presidents are so synonymous with a football club. And
agreed.
I think we need that. We need that little bit of arrogance, fun arrogance. And hopefully Robert can be that guy. We saw him do a little interview with the besties straight away. And hopefully that's a sign of him being a little bit more involved in the community. He doesn't need to be in the middle of the cheer squad every single week. He doesn't need to be jumping on the podcast every single week. We'd love it. If he wants to do it, feel free, please. But we'll definitely, I'll kick myself out of the pod and it can just be Robert and Lockie every week. I have no issue with that. But that'll be interesting to see the perspective, because that really changed. And maybe that was a good thing when we see how well Sayers allegedly uses social media, that maybe it was a good thing he wasn't trying to connect with us all and tag us on the socials. Who knows what could have happened, Big old 6-gamer Matthew Dick was popping up over the off season. Great man. But I agree with you, Lockie. I think that'll probably be the biggest thing out of this presidency, seeing how he does engage with the fans, because we're nuts. We are so engaged online. We are the number one club when it comes to the amount of podcasts, the amount of people on Twitter just slinging everything on Instagram. We are one of the biggest clubs in the social media land. I think it's something you can tap into, and I'm really excited to see what he does. The question I do have for you on the appointment is probably more, there's a little couple of components to it. One is that I think the issue with Sayers when he was appointed was he'd already been on the board for a while. And so a lot of people were saying, well, he's already been there and you haven't done anything. Why should you just walk in and get the job? There was also the issue of the years on his tenure. Because he wasn't fresh, it limited the amount of years he could be president. Something I've heard from a few Carlton supporters on this appointment is, well, we didn't select him. This is again another appointment that the board, the leaders at the club, they have selected a guy. The members haven't had a say in this appointment. Does any of that worry you at all or change how you see this? Do you think we're at a stage where you would have liked a fresh perspective, a different voice? How do you kind of see those little components around the Rob Priestley appointment?
Well, it's probably two different questions there. On the first one about the members playing a role in selecting someone, no, I'm not into that. I do not think that we have the information to make a good decision in that regard. Because while I said that for me as a fan, that engagement and the personality behind this person is a really thing that I would love to see. There's so many other important behind the scene roles that the president plays that I just do not think that we will do a good job of going to a vote and doing that. Do you want to rebut that first part first?
Would you at least like to see what the potential opposing candidates have to say, or at least what Robert would be running on for his appointment?
Yeah.
Like if we're not selecting it, I feel like I would still like to know why you wanted to be the president, what you're going to do, and what others were thinking. I think I'm stuttering around it because I don't actually have a full-fledged form.
We could debate this.
An opinion on this. There's a degree of there needs to be some democracy, and maybe this is my distrust of corporations, but at the end of the day, do they always have what their running's best interests at mind, or are they looking after their same people? And, well, I want to stay on the board, so I'm going to elect someone that I have a good relationship rather with someone who might come in and clean house. There's always those sort of elements that are going to be at play when there are these sort of politics around it. So sometimes you need to have a democracy to ensure that it's not just the same cycle of the same people getting hired and not different voices that could take
100% agree.
But I do, to a degree, I mean, you look at elections around the world, people are very divided on who gets in all the time. And sometimes it doesn't look like people make great decisions. So if we all make the decision, are we the smartest person in this and well-versed to make a decision that might have a big influence? Like, I don't think we should be selecting the coach. So should we be
that was going to be my rebuttal.
voting for this? It's a very interesting argument. And I don't think I'm formed truly either way. But I think from an entertainment point of view, I would have loved to have seen who would put their hand up for the president and what campaign they would be running on. Why should we vote for you? I always find that quite fun in this sense.
I really, really like the point you raised there. You've probably brought me back to the middle of not having a stance either. So thank you for that. Because if I take your coach example, which, like I said, was going to be my rebuttal, if there was any role related to Carlton that should be a democracy, it probably should be the president. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And we do vote on board members and things like that.
Yes.
So it is something we can have a say on.
It's just this specific circumstance.
Yes. This time around, no.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And it's interesting because the last
than I expected it to be.
The last time around it was similar. It was, we had a review. Whoop, we've made the appointment. It didn't go out to the fans at all, which if you've got that conspiracy hat that it's the same people running it and it's this not so friendly atmosphere, then you're going to run with that. Let's park that discussion because I don't think we've truly got the form around it. But from a time to bring fresh thoughts, fresh perspective, someone who hasn't been there with the same people, same ideas, where do you land on that hypothetical argument?
Yeah, I stray away from that too, because when I think about the decision making that's happened since the review, I can't think of anything that I disagree with. So it would have to be the opposite for me to feel like I want those fresh ideas, like the different appointments that have happened throughout the time and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I hate coming back to this, but it's really that engagement piece, which is what is missing. So yeah, if someone fresh was going to be that person, then I'm interested. But the stability piece, of course, that's the narrative that they're going to take with this appointment, but it does resonate with me.
Yeah, no, I had that written down. It's a club narrative, so I feel weird peddling it, but I just agree with it. Like exactly what Priestley said we have this 5-year plan. So we kind of need the same people that are here to finish this plan, or at least pass it on to the next person who's there to fulfill it. It feels weird to make those changes. And if I can rebuttal the devil's advocate of needing to bring in someone with new ideas who isn't already there, the criticism was lobbied at Luke Sayers when he was appointed that, well, you've been on the board this whole time, you haven't made change. Why should we let you have it? I think the difference between him and the Duduche was somewhat obvious. So I think there is a difference that we questioned this at the time. Is there a difference from you sitting on a board and you having ultimate power? I think we've decided, yes. There's a difference.
Completely
Intrigued
agree.
to know the different ideas that Priestley has, but right now, I think we didn't need too much change. 3 years' time from now, maybe would be a good time to bring in a new voice, but I have no issues with his appointment now. And by all accounts, he was the one that was being groomed to take over at the end of the season. So I really don't think losing Sayers now is that big of a deal when they probably already had Priestley there to take the role. You know, they would have been thinking about this right now, and they probably had him ticked off going, yep, he's going to be the guy. It's just happened a year sooner. It's not that big of a change for me.
And when you look at, like, in the totality of the club, at like maybe 6 months ago, and you say, so what's not working with Carlton right now? You'd probably say injuries. And that's probably the key thing not going right with the club.
And question marks on like coaching, like to the football side. It's definitely not the businessy side of things.
And so we've made a change in that area. So it's like, yeah, what do you want? Fresh new ideas, like around what? Like what needs to be freshened up now?
Yeah, no, 100%. And hopefully, you know, Priestley's got that bit of Elliot in him where he is, you know, that personality that can come out and always be out there.
I hope so.
Being a voice of the football club, because I think that's what we as a fan base want. It's why I think sometimes we haven't loved Voss 100% because he maybe hasn't, when we've wanted the passion speech that he's probably giving to the players, to the media, he's been pretty straight. We want someone to take us on that ride. We want someone a little bit nuts.
Agreed.
So I don't know. Hopefully Priestley has a bit of that in him.
I thought those examples you made about, you know, of presidents you see with other clubs is really strong. Like my contention would be that the presidential role needs to have that public facing part. It's the CEO that I look more to as, yeah, if you're not somebody that wants to be in the public eye and you just want to get the job done, I get it, but that's not the president to me.
No, I love it. So let us know your thoughts on the appointment. Would you have liked some fresh ideas? Would you have liked to vote it? Let us know. We are on the fence on that one completely. So very interested to know all the arguments below. Now, this has been a very long podcast.
I've loved
the first one back. This is how much we've been keen to talk about footy. We've been bottled up for months, and it's all finally coming to the top. And we've still got a little bit to talk about. We've got one more little bit on the run sheet here. So please bear with us. And if you have stuck around this long, let us know in the comments. I'm always interested to know who are those that are still staying till the end when we're talking absolute dribble. But enough from me. We'll finish on looking towards those preseason games, because the next episode that's coming up is our season predictions. One of the most fun episodes I think we have filming, where we throw out our hot takes, who's under the pump, who are the ones to watch. Then we can reflect on at the end of the season, everything that's gone wrong. So the episodes will be coming out weekly. It's going to be a lot of fun leading up to the season. But talking about the actual football and what we're going to witness against St Kilda and against GWS in the coming months. What is it that you're looking to get out of this? You know, is it game plan that you're looking for, little tweaks in the tactics? Is it growth from individual players? What is it that you want to get out of preseason 2025?
Yeah, for me as a fan, I think the positional changes is the most interesting part for me. Like, that's the thing that is clearly intrigued us in this episode. So you get a bit more clarity when you see those preseason games. From a game plan perspective, that's a funny one, because you could imagine that the coaching team don't want to like give away too much of their hand when you don't need to. So I won't be too worried if I don't see a lot of change in that department. And I guess another thing is you just don't want to see injuries. So it's one of those things where, I mean, we always talk about the years when we absolutely dominated the preseasons just to be the wooden spoon team. You don't want to see the players going as hard as they can.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, I am very similar to you. It's just, I want to see some individual players out there. You know, what's Jagger Smith like in the Carlton lineup? That's something that excites me. One, we were pumping him up so much. And it feels like Jagger Smith has completely stolen this man's thunder. And I haven't heard his name uttered in a while, but like Cooper Lord, he feels forgotten already. We were hyping him up as the next coming of Chris Judd. And all of a sudden, we've forgotten about him. So I want to see what he's like with a bit more time under his belt at the club. I mean, there's so much. We could go through so many of them. But I want to ask you about a little bit of it. The key squad battles, positional battles that you spoke about, where does that hierarchy kind of sit for you? What are the ones you're looking at? And where do you see it right now? So we can revisit this.
It's so hard, though. It's so hard. Because like the first
key defenders. Let's start.
Well, I thought about the rucks firstly.
Okay, we'll go.
But then it goes to our... yeah, can you please... Excuse me. But it goes to what we spoke about before, which is like I could so easily see Pito being the number one ruck in all the preseason, and then him not being there round one. Right?
I want to see Hudson O'Keefe. I'll be honest. That's my big
Huddo number one,
because they've been talking him up a little bit. Everyone's saying who's put on size. It's Big Skull. He's been doing it. So where does he line up into this? We kind of forget about him a little bit. Is he someone that could ruck with the Koning and be another option? Is he someone that is a bit more mobile and can play a bit down forward as well? I'm intrigued in that to add to it. But I agree with you where I could see them try different things in preseason games and say, hey, Tom, go forward. I want to see what this looks like with Pito just rucking. And then all of a sudden, Pito's not named for the first 6 rounds. That could 100% happen. But I'm intrigued to know what different setups they go with and what looks like it's working better.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Kemp is obviously one that is super interesting to me. I could hear your arguments either way, whether you think that he is a walk-up round one guy or not, because of the role. And then, Sauce at the other end. Like, they're the two, I guess, most intriguing things to me. Like, what does he even look like playing down there? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you the question. I want a hierarchy on the key defenders right now.
Assuming that Kemp is not a key defender.
Assuming Kemp is not a key defender. Assuming Wiedering's already a lock.
It's probably the same.
There's 2 spots there. Where's it sitting?
Yeah. I guess you have to have Haynes over Sauce at this stage.
Yeah.
Just because of what you know.
Is Lewis in contention at all?
No.
Okay. I have the same. Midfield. I want to ask you a little bit about this battle.
Yeah.
You've got the Jagger Smith versus the Cooper Lord. It looks like Jagger Smith is running away with this, but Cooper Lord's the one we kind of forgot about. So where does he fit in this kind of hierarchy right now? Do you see him starting round one?
Lord?
Yes.
I think that I probably have him as my sub.
Yep. I think we're very similarly aligned there. Wing roll. This is a bit more exciting. Now that Ollie's not there, Newman is not anywhere. Knowing that Akers himself might not be 100%, take Akers away. You have to go 2 wingers. Who are they?
Wow. That's incredibly hard because... yeah, we pretty much know that Hollands is not going to be one of them as well. So, yeah, I guess Cottrell feels like he's a best 23 player. So he's probably one of them. And then, put your Doc on the other.
Yeah. Where do you see Binns in this? Is he... Is he in the conversation? Is he someone you're just
Yeah.
not even entertaining because would you start to look at Walsh on the wing, Chera on the wing, moving Ollie Hollands
Definitely.
before Binns? Is that where you see it?
I think I'm there for sure. The sample size has just been so small of Binns at the top level at this stage, and I'm positive on him for the future. But
yeah,
there's a lot
I
of
probably
guys
have
to
him
get
in
in there.
I agree. When I'm trying to build the best team, which we'll definitely have an episode on that at some stage,
Yeah,
I'd rather bring in an extra midfield and have Walshy split his time with a Cottrell rather than Binns at this stage.
right.
But I think back end of the season, I'll be interested to know where how he's tracking, because those 2 games he performed quite well. I liked his attacking flair, and maybe that's something we need inside 50. Someone that just wants to take that game on, someone that wants to run. But at this stage, he's probably just not there. And then finally, the small forwards. And I'll throw Ashton Moyer into that as well, just because he's definitely not a key forward. He's kind of, I feel like this is a weird way to categorize it. But when I'm looking at the forward line, you've got the key forwards, you've got Elijah Hollands and Cottrell, and then you've kind of got the smalls and the mediums. I don't see Moyer as Cottrell or Hollands, the way they play, have them more with the others. Is that where you see it? And I kind of want to get your thoughts on the hierarchy of the goal kicking small players.
It's weird because goal kicking small players. It's really hard for me to know what the structure is going to be. It kind of goes back to our forward line conversation earlier, which is I think that we'll actually see a lot of different structures this year, depending on who's healthy and with experimentation. Because, oh my God, it's really hard. But so you wouldn't kind of you don't see Williams as kind of being a similar kind of role to Hollands and Cottrell even? I could see Williams getting up the ground more this year.
I've probably made a mistake in categorizing it as I have. I'll be dead honest right now, because
we're 2 hours in.
It's made it more complicated, because when we do the depth chart and the position, like I think Moyer would take like Cottrell's position, like spot in the team, but he's not that role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's strange, but okay, so we'll piss Moyer off at the moment in this conversation. I want to talk just small forwards. We're having Harry in this team, Charlie in this team. We're also having Elijah.
Yes.
That means, let's say 3 to 4 spots out of the whole pool. Where are we sitting with them?
I would almost argue that Fogg is then the 4th lock in this forward line.
I agree.
And then it would be Williams.
Yep, I agree. Motlop. Now, where does it sit? Does Cottrell take
that's your 6?
That balance spot, or would you prefer a Moyer in that, or a Fantasia?
Yeah, I have Cottrell at this stage.
Yeah, I do as well. I've then got Moyer, the length of the Flemington Straight, and then coin toss
Fantasia.
Between Durden and Fantasia.
Makes sense.
It's probably Durden because ceiling, I guess, but I'm not confident on it.
Would you be surprised if Fantasia, I don't know,
starts round 1?
Why am I so? I was just going to say has a really good season.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Neither.
He does some good things. Like I feel like the fan base hates him for whatever reason. Somewhat justified potentially on selection last year, but clearly he does something they like. And there are some inside 50s that man delivers that I'm like, that was beautiful. Can we just get that for 4 quarters? So wouldn't surprise me if he starts round 1 and plays the most games out of most of those smalls.
But by the way, in that list that we just did, we didn't mention Kemp either. So that's also a spot that is up for,
Yeah. It'll be interesting. We're going to have that discussion very in-depth in our Best 23 and Depth Chart episode that'll hopefully happen after we've seen some football, so we can actually make some educated decisions on this. But before we go, Lockie, the preseason games will happen. How much can we read into them is my question to you.
You ask me this every year, mate. And it never changes. I mean, I can't remember what the result was, but I remember watching our game against Melbourne last year, and gee, they looked unbelievably good. To my recollection, Melbourne, that is. Gorney was out there absolutely tearing it up, and then we know what happened with their season. So,
yeah, mate. My rule of thumb is if you win, everything counts. You read into it.
Yeah.
If we lose, it's preseason, mate. It doesn't matter. It's just preseason.
Really
I think
rule.
that because realistically,
it's so true.
I don't think it can take a lot other than all I want is just those little glimpses of those younger players, the ones that are fighting for those spots in the team. That's what I want to see. Something to get excited about as we head towards round one. But let us know your thoughts on everything we've covered. What are your expectations for the year? What is the pass mark? What does success looks like? Want to know all your thoughts on the contract re-signings, everything. We've spoken about so much, I can't even rattle it off all right now. But we will be back next week for another episode. We will be going through all of our season predictions, the hot takes, you name it. We cannot wait. So happy to be back producing these episodes each and every week. It's going to be a massive 2025. Up the buddy baggers. See you guys next time.